This is both Camden Public Library's annual Maritime Month and National Poetry Month. And as soon as I became aware of that, I called Julia, and here we are. And thank you, Julia, and thank all of you for joining us. The full title of the book is SEAWARD, a Lyrical Memoir, because many of the poems are about the sea. Most are written in lyrical style, and each, in some way, arises out of my first 89 years. There are 112 poems in SEAWARD, arranged in 8 sections by subject. Because we're here to help celebrate Maritime Month, most I read this evening will be poems about the sea. Then, after those, I'll read a few others to give you an idea of what else is in the book. Because you'll be hearing each poem only once, and you probably don't have a written copy to refer to, I decided it might be helpful to find an appropriate visual image to go with each poem. To set the stage or in some other way, help the poem communicate better with you. For most of the photos, I have my wife Erin to thank. After I finish reading each poem, I'll pause with the image for that poem still on the screen to let you think about the poem for a moment before I go on to the next. The sea has been a vital and nearly omnipresent part of my life since my earliest childhood, as it has been for so many others. That's not surprising for those of us living along the coast, but perhaps it goes much deeper than just proximity. After all, the percentage of salt in everyone's blood is the same as in the sea. I hope you'll enjoy these poems. This is the prelude to the book. I write my way home. I am no Ulysses, yet I return from many wars. Some I may have won, others lost. The times took little note. There were few dispatches from the front. Now, memory often fails. I cannot recall the outcome of those wars, but line by line, this poetry will reveal. "13 Ways of Looking at the Sea." 1. Here great white bears would roam and hunt on miles of frozen sea. Now they starve, adrift alone on melting lily pads of ice, undone by 4 degrees. 2. The sea ends at the horizon I can never reach, and still I try. 3. The sea was here. Observe the fossils in the desert rocks. It will return. 4. Dip your finger in the sea and lick, or gulp with burning lungs. The taste is just the same. 5. When I first met the sea, it chilled my toes. Now, 89 years have passed. It chills my bones. 6. In fog, the sea's a saucer 50 yards across. I'm at the center. Can't get off. 7. An oily slick or raging storm. It's all the same. The sea will take us, slow or quick. 8. The seagull smells the storm and does not soar. He's seen the sea enraged before. He sits and eats his crab. 9. The sea has always been a one-way street. Millions have gone out and not returned. They have gone home. 10. Raindrops pelt the sea. It doesn't care. It was already wet. 11. The sea is home to sunken ships and sailors' bones. Someday it will receive mine too in long embrace. 12. Without the sea, you cannot know the earth, an egg without the yolk. 13. To know the sea is brutal work. Grasp your oars and row. Dawn watch. I often dream from 4 to 8, the navigator's watch, of taking sights on waning stars to find us on that endless writhing sea. Braced against the roll and pitch, my sextant white of salty spray, I search the sky for breaks in clouds, locate 3 stars, and pin us on my empty ocean charts. In other dreams, storm clouds obscure the stars, or too late I become aware I missed a crucial step. In those nightmares, I jerk awake, await the shuddering crash. Camden Harbor Sunrise, an ekphrastic poem referencing this painting by Jacobus Boss. Old money built and keeps these wooden boats. Money made from hunting whales in sailing ships, or round the Horn in China trade, or carrying molasses, rum, and slaves, or building railroads, mills, or making shoes, then carefully grown in family trusts, doled to generations in their times, so summer joys would never end. These boats now wait for dinghies filled with kids, still champ at moorings, eager for the sea. On the left is my ship as she looked in March 1955, when I first came aboard, right out of officer candidate school. On the right is how she looks today. The longest voyage. Ensign, welcome to the ship. Here's your cabin, upper bunk. You have the mid-watch, 12 to 4. Be on the bridge by 1:45. We'll soon be in the iceberg zone. A winter gale is bearing down. 1,100 miles to go. I need to get some sleep. 67 years have passed. Scuttled ship down 90 feet. Through scuba bubble clouds, I see her ghostly shape. Then bridge deck where I stood and ran the ship, 4 hours on, 8 off. She and I survived the storms until at last undone by time and rust. Ocean Station Bravo. 10 miles square, far North Atlantic, past shipping lanes patrolled by icebergs. No little cat feet here. The fog roars in on gales. Freight train waves, intent on murder, rack the hull. It groans and shudders. Caking ice may roll us over. Leaden skies meld with the ocean, block celestial observation. If I die here, will God find me? Fair thanks. We're homeward bound from Newfoundland after winter months at sea. Boston, 1,000 miles away. 3 days if weather holds. 6 hours out. Shortwave radio erupts. Mayday, Mayday, Dragger Anne Marie, position mid-Grand Banks. 240 miles northeast. Search and rescue Boston orders. You're the closest, turn around. Our beloved and hated pig iron bitch, 120 men aboard, shutters crashing through each wave into the building storm. 11 hours later, radar spots the Anne Marie. Crew reports in French, water rising in the bilge, main engine drowned, bilge pumps out. In 2 hours, we'll go down. Now raging gale. We launch a lifeboat, rescue pumps and crew aboard. 9 hours later, bilge pumped dry, leak patched well enough to get them home. Engine running strong. Our men prepare to leave. Mittens caked in ice, their crew heaves us their thanks. 2 bags, 50 pounds of scallops each. When Neptune's winter children play, silvered by the brine, born as trees a century before, in forests by this rock-bound shore. 60 feet or more they stretch, blown down by ocean gales, fell into the sea, rode deep currents, bark wore away, limbs sheared off, then washed into this granite cove, trapped by winds and tides, entwined in tangled piles, where summer's children play. Winter comes, children gone, time for Neptune's children to return as giant waves and tides from open ocean storms, refloating every trunk and root, roaring in their thundering joy. Like giants playing pickup sticks, they toss and rearrange until the final winter storm. Then leave their new design for summer children's play. SEGUIN Island After Storm, an ekphrastic poem based on this painting by Claudette Gamache. But first, a brief background. Some lighthouses have myths surrounding them. SEGUIN Island Light is one of those. Built at the order of President George Washington, is said to be haunted by the ghosts of some of its past lighthouse keepers. As I read the poem, consider who may be telling the story. Hate this sentinel island, last sight of seamen outward bound, beacon for their safe return, enrobed for weeks in fog like cotton, blasted by the North Atlantic, seas from last storm crashing in. Paint the tower with its stairway spiraling to the beacon light. Paint our dwelling by the tower, housed 2 centuries of keepers, pouring lamp oil, trimming wicks, tending foghorn, ringing bell. Painter, we were those keepers. Can you paint our spirits lingering still? The storm has passed. The slightest ripples left behind. The sun now sparkles on the sea. The breeze murmurs in the pines. The osprey soars through brilliant skies. Sandpipers pecking on the beach. A buoy washed up on the rocks. A pale hand reaching from the kelp. The sailor underneath who sleeps. Last row. Late afternoon, he stepped into his wooden skiff, the one he built when he was 12. Heavy wool plaid pants and top, high black rubber boots, a lobsterman's attire. Gray clouds, southeasterly breeze, and ebbing tide, the ocean, April cold. He rode with mainman's choppy strokes, never turned his head. At Summer Island's dock, tied his bowline to a ring. Next morning, men arrived to work, saw his skiff, hand clasping rail, the rest of him submerged. I knew this man. He taught me how to fish for cod. No one knows the rest. Gulf Stream, heralded by screaming seabirds, dolphins dancing in the bow wave. On this twisting ocean ribbon, I stand naked at the helm, burning bridges in my wake. Constant winds that blow nor'eastward fill the sails that drive me on. Days I steer by blazing sun lines, through the nights by cold North Star. Beyond Cape Horn. Below 40 degrees south, there is no law. Below 50 degrees south, there is no God. That's an old sailor's adage. I will pack one thing. In distant times, it went ahead, still knows the way. A dead-eye, fist-like, carved by shipwrights' calloused hands, from lignum vitae, ironwood, so dense it will not float. In age of sail, it held a shroud that stayed a mast, that flew the sails, that drove the ship around Cape Horn at 60 south to bring back treasure from the far, far east. This one returned each time, but many more did not, dashed on ledges of that cape, or sunk in winter gales, or dismasted, driven south, embalmed in ice. 10,000 sailors and their ships were taken by that cape. Long this dead-eye rested on my desk and held my pen. Now I call it back to sea. It knows the way beyond whatever capes I've yet to face. Last thing he did. All his keepers disbelieved it. All his med charts said he couldn't, and the bed rails that he wouldn't. So they thought, until he vanished. Late and dark, fog like cotton, wavelets lapping and the sea breeze bring him finally to the shoreline. Ancient knees bend toward the water. Now one finger in the ocean. Taste that takes him back to childhood and the salty womb before then. All those ancient lingering memories. With that finger always tasting. Winter storms across the Gulf Stream. Freezing spray in Arctic oceans. Crashing through the grinding sea ice. Raging mountains, faintest ripples. And that true taste everlasting. On that last night, early morning, final taste, his last communion. I wake into a dream, a place I'd never been, a rock-strewn shore. The air is sweet with salt. Incoming drifting fog still leaves an outward path beyond the ledge and sea, a path to take if seaward ever calls. And then it all comes back. A promise I once swore 100 miles from here. My daily car commute, this same Atlantic shore. A voice I clearly heard above the morning news. We have a rendezvous. Without a thought, I said, I know, I will be there. I take that seaward path. Now we're back ashore. When I could fly. My mother read a chapter every night, tucked me in, kissed me goodnight, blew out the lamp. The book, The Boy's King Arthur, Lancelot, my hero, Guinevere, my queen. I drew Excalibur from the rock, jousted and unhorsed the Black Knight, smote off his head, met Sir Galahad, pure as snow. To find the Holy Grail became my quest. In dreams one night, its secret was revealed. At dawn, I tiptoed out and watched the sun arise above the trees. I stared and stared, and then the golden chalice sipped by Christ appeared. I'd found the Holy Grail. Filled with joy, I leapt and flew over mountains, moon, the stars, and under seas. Planets and constellations I explored, then back for blueberry pancakes just in time. This was the front page of the New York Times on December 30th, 1939. My sister was 6. Her core. My little sister's memory melts layer by layer. So much has slipped away. Every day is new. Soon she'll ask again, when did my husband die? And yet, sometimes she recalls with laser clarity childhood things that shaped our lives. Last week recalled December Sunday's first page of the New York Times, 100 neediest cases, each a desperate cry for help. She pondered who the neediest family was, scraped up her allowance coins, had mother mail them to the family she had picked. Now she looks at me and says, that's how I learned to really give. Something that's your own, something you want to keep, but give because there's someone else who needs it more than you. Time leaves so much for her to teach. What if it's not the frost? Each spring I count the gravestones newly tipped aside, after decades standing straight. Is there a silent clock below? Alarm that whispers, wake, wake, push hard, throw off that weight. It's time to sprout and bloom again. You have another job to do. Best stay alert. Maybe these spirits search for us again to be our guides. This is the last poem I'll read tonight. Homecoming. 10 years old, wartime outboard ration, none. I row in fog or sun or dark to reach my island home. Blue old town skiff, leathered oars, my ship. Reading patterns of the waves, faintest breezes on my cheeks, taste of salt spray on my tongue, waves breaking on the reefs, scent of balsam from the shore, pocket compass on my knee. These my navigation tools. Skiff dragged up the beach. Ancient apple trees bear fruit. Milkweed fields feed clouds of monarchs. Fireflies light the night. Deer paths overarched by pine and fir. Ancient woods glow with phosphorescent moss. Orange, pink, and yellow toadstools grow in fairy rings. Eagles, osprey, soar the sky. Blue heron waits and waits, then strikes. Curious seal observes. To this island I've returned to slowly write my farewell poems. Thank you. Now I'll try to answer any questions. Julia, would you preside?
Hello, thank you so much, Nick. That was excellent. And you can return us to the screen by hitting the little red stop share button at the top of your screen, and that'll bring it back to just me and you. There we go. And go gallery, there we are. Thank you so much, Nick. That stirred up so much listening to it. It's hard to talk about it afterwards. I feel as though I've been hit by waves and quite literally. I now invite anyone who might have questions for Nick to go ahead and type them into the Q&A box. You can find that at the bottom of your screen, and I will read those questions aloud to Nick. We do have a large audience here tonight, so we're just going to take typed questions. And while we wait to see if anyone does have questions, I had a couple of my own. Nick, you seem to use paintings and artwork to inspire some of your poems. Are you yourself an artist? Do you do any painting or photography?
Well, there was a period when I tried to do some painting and spent some time at it and enjoyed it very much. And it was hard to do both, let's say that. Painting is poetry with paint and brush, and poetry is painting with words. And so they go together in that sense, but I think the skills are somewhat different. And I decided I thought I was probably a better poet than a painter. And so I pretty well put away my easel and paints and brushes.
We have Casey who says, Nick is an incredibly talented artist with 3 exclamation points. So,
Well, thank you, Casey.
I also want to mention that we had a comment come in. Wonderful, Nick, revives so many memories of a lifetime. Can't wait to have a copy of SEAWARD. And I just want to remind folks that SEAWARD is available to be purchased if you live in Camden at our Owl and Turtle bookshop. It's also at the Sherman's bookstores throughout Maine and also at Sherman's online. Also available at Amazon.com and from indieauthorbooks.com. And I've typed those into the chat box for you. We have another question that came in. It says, have you ever fished commercially? Paul wants to know that.
No, I have not. I've done quite a bit of personal with my father initially and others fishing off the coast of Maine, but not commercially. I do know a number of commercial fishermen, and I have learned from them.
Certainly, thank you.
And also, I should say this, that in the Coast Guard, that was our job to help commercial fishermen who were in trouble. And that's what we did for 4 years. So I got to know many commercial fishermen that way and their lives. And I've had many conversations. So yes, I feel I've sort of inherited in that way through my self an understanding of what commercial fishing is like. And as in fair trade, I mean, we got right down with these guys and appreciate what they put up with and what they endured. And every time you buy a piece of fish, you should think about how it got there.
Yeah. And again, that photo that you had up with the wave right up against the ship like that, it was incredible. Thank you for sharing that image with us. It really set the stage.
I took that from the topmost mast on my ship. In those conditions.
Well, thank you.
I probably wouldn't try that today.
Thank you for the brave work you did as part of the Coast Guard. Casey wants to know, what has been your favorite body of water that you've sailed and why?
Oh, that has to be the coast of Maine, because of its infinite variety, literally infinite variety. I don't know, I've forgotten the statistic as to how many miles it is if it were all stretched out straight, but it's some enormous number. And of course, not only are there so many tiny little places to poke into that sometimes you feel have never been seen before since the early explorers. And also because the coast changes minute by minute almost with the weather and the tides and the light and the fog, of course. So it's infinitely varied and challenging and beautiful. So that's not to diminish other places I've sailed, but that's the answer, Casey.
Well, I think we have a handful of Mainers here tonight who would probably agree, even though they're very well traveled too. Robert asks, he says, Nick, I am curious about the other sections of your book. How did you decide to divide the sections? In other words, okay, go ahead and answer that, and then I'll jump into the rest. He has a couple questions.
Well, that was very, very difficult. And for that, I had a great deal of help from Meredith, who's credited in the beginning of the book as my editor. And that was a major thing she did, because that's very, very hard. And she was creative in titles. Meredith Thomas, it was Meredith Mitchell now. She's married and has a little baby. But she did a wonderful job in understanding my poems and being able to read below the title and trying to find and often finding their true character. Sometimes she pointed it out to me. She said, Nick, this isn't really a poem about this. It's a poem about that. Can you see that? And so that was a big help. And they're very varied. It's hard. I don't know how much time you want to spend. I could read them all 8. Do you want me to do that or not?
Robert
That's not
also
the
wanted
point.
to, Robert wanted to also know, did you decide to go chronological or thematic? So yeah, if you want to read the titles of all 8 sections, that would be great.
It won't take too long. Well, the answer is both or all. Hold on a minute. Here we go. Okay, here's another copy. Yeah, okay, here we go. The titles. Right at the beginning. No, the contents. All right, here we go. The first section is It All Began, which is largely chronological, as you might expect. The next title is SEAWARD, which has some of the poems I read tonight, but not all, because SEAWARD is very hard to classify. Some are obviously about the sea, but also I use the sea as a metaphor. And there are poems relating to the sea or referring to the sea that we decided were really better in one of the other topics, which I'll get to. Then we get to the winter poems. And those are a little bit scary. Those are poems, well, let's say from last winter, the COVID winter. Poem called House Cat, guess who that was, and so forth. Dark poems, and so forth. The next one is This Island Home, which relate, I think, not entirely to McMahon Island, the island referred to sooner. Then there's a section called It's Not For This. And that is includes my Memorial Day / Veterans Day poem that I've recycled for a number of years as the headlines changed, in which a group of veterans, deceased veterans, spirits come back, look around and say, that's not why I died. In other words, looking at the evils in the world, the sad things, the starvation and all that. And there are probably 10, 12 poems there. Next one is Who We Meant by We. And that's, I thank Meredith for that suggestion. I think that's family. That's about the family. Multi generations of the family, some individual characters from the family, the relationship over the family over the generations, and individual situations relating to family members. Then a section, Always on My Mind. And that's about love in every manifestation. Then there's a section called By the Brush of God. And that is trying to look at a number of nature's beauties and complicated. A lot of things were thrown in there, but they all have to do with the rest of the life on this earth, besides ourselves. And then another section, the last section, is This Wandering. And it's this observations on life, again, natural beauty, then called Ode to a Peeper Frog. Is it really spring? A highly timely poem about looking out the window here and crocuses are coming up and all, and lists all the signs of spring. It ends with forecast is for snow. And I think most people could read it in Maine, recognize that. So that's sort of it. They're not crystal clear. They're sort of attempts. And life isn't made up of tiny little discrete segments either. So that's my reason why I have to say the book is we tried to make a distinction among poems and package it that way, but it's not crystal clear, and it couldn't be.
Well, thank
That's
you.
a long answer.
It's okay. Thank you for the explanation. It gave us a nice look into what we can expect to read in the other parts of the book. Nat had a question. He wanted to know, while you were busy with your law career and raising a family, did you ever yearn to write poetry?
Interesting. That's what I guess is not accurately be described as the right and left sides of my brain. You know, I majored in English, read a lot of poetry in school, liked poetry. I don't think I ever wrote very much. Growing up and practicing law, I would occasionally write a poem for a friend's birthday or wedding or first child, things like that. Sort of poems for an occasion. They're called occasional poems like that, which I enjoyed, but you know, I wouldn't be proud of them now. They were fun, and but it really wasn't until after I left my law career that I started noticing that other part of my brain that seemed a little bit ignored. And I started painting first, actually, and then the poetry. And now that's about all I do. Well, I just finished my tax return, but I mean, other than that, I pretty much spend all my time not just writing poetry, but trying to observe. After all, a poet needs to look at what they see. And I have lots of poems about that too.
Well, it sounds like a good way to spend the day.
Yeah.
So for those who have not actually visually seen Nick's poems, I wanted to ask, Nick, why don't you use punctuation?
Well, I don't, and I'm often asked that. And I've one of my teachers in California, I think was the one, Dorothea Bisbas, who's on the back of the book. She encouraged that. And the basic idea is, I think, in my words, that modern poetry is largely intended to be ambiguous. And depending on how you read a line in a poem or two lines, either you stop at the end of the line and take a breath and start the next line as though it's separate, but the words you might notice in some cases can be read together and it has a different meaning if you don't stop and read it all as one sentence. And the same thing is the breaks between stanzas, or even the use of words that have ambiguous meanings. And one of my favorite authors was W.S. Merwin. He was the U.S. Poet Laureate for a number of years, and he won 2 Pulitzer Prizes for poetry. And he died just 3 years ago in his 90s. And he didn't use poetry for the last many, many decades. And he was asked why, and I like his answer. Punctuation basically has to do with prose and the printed word. I came to feel that punctuation was like nailing the words onto the page. Since I wanted instead the movement and lightness of the spoken word, one step toward that was to do away with punctuation. Now, this is highly debatable, but that's my take, and I'm going to stick with it, I expect.
Well, thank you for that explanation. And we have someone who says, since you mentioned cod fishing, could you explain why it is different from other fishing?
Well, I guess anyone would realize it's different from fly fishing. With the cod fishing, it's by hand line. I'm talking now, and even commercially, it's done by lines by individual hooks on long lines. But anyway, traditionally you take a long fishing line, normally tarred, and you have a lead weight that may weigh a pound, or sometimes, depending on the conditions, more. And you have a big hook, maybe 3-4 inches long, and you bait it with cod or clams, I mean, or other fish. And then you drop it overboard. You go to drop it off until the weight hits the bottom. Then you pull it up a few feet, because the cod are bottom feeders, as are other fish like this. And you wait, and wait. And hopefully a cod will wander along, see the clam, take a bite, and then you have a little tug, you hold, you try to set the hook, and you pull it up hand by hand. That's the fundamentals of cod fishing, whether you do it one by one or on longer lines. Fly fishing, I'm not fly fishing, but you know how dainty and fancy and elegant and that is. And there are other ways of fishing, like harpooning, a long pole with a sharp lance really in the end. You try to get close enough to a tuna, let's say, to drive it right into the fish, and then he will take off and hopefully not get off his line. I'm not going to describe every type of fishing, but there are very huge differences between many.
Yes, I've actually tried cod fishing in the manner that you described, with the dropping the line over and waiting. And I was up in Machiasport and was unsuccessful. So
yeah, well, I have if you want more, I have a specific book, a poem about cod fishing.
Oh, really?
In the book, yes, yes.
Very cool.
Not a happy day for me either.
It was at least a nice day on the boat, you know.
Okay.
We have Paul mentioning that he worked for the O'Hara family in Rockland for over 40 years, and that they had a number of commercial fishing vessels, and he wanted to thank Nick for his service to the Coast Guard. So I wanted to make sure that we mention that. I think that we did manage to, in one way, shape, or form, you have answered the other questions that came in. And thank you so much for taking the time to listen to what all these folks have had to say about you, which is really nice stuff. We have Bravo Nick fondly from Ireland. That's exciting.
Wow. a long distance prize, perhaps.
Yes, Alan is saying excellent read. So many people typing such lovely, kind things, and I couldn't agree with them more. But I'm gonna end on Ray's comment here. Ray and Rita say, thank you for taking us out to sea and returning us safely to shore on your ship of poetry. And I think that was beautifully said. And I am so glad we did this tonight, Nick. And I hope I am too. I hope we can have you back again, and maybe even in person at the library next time. That would be. I
would enjoy that, I'm sure. Thank you.
That would be very special.
And thank you, everybody in the audience.
Thank you again to everyone who joined us tonight. This was a lot of fun. I have recorded the program, as I mentioned at the beginning, and it will be available on the Camden Public Library Program's YouTube channel. If you have any difficulty locating that or would like a direct link to the recording, please email me. You can find my email in the email you received with the Zoom link tonight. Once again, Nick, thank you so much. This was very enjoyable.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
All right.
Good night, all.
Good night, everyone.